Patrick Mahomes has finally revealed what Travis Kelce told him after the wedding, and it's giving fans a behind-the-scenes look at one of the biggest celebrity events of the year. But that conversation was only part of the story. What happened after the celebration could shape Kelce's next chapter. Let me break it down. Let's set the scene, because the scene matters here. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift got married at Madison Square Garden, and Patrick Mahomes was one of roughly 1,000 people who watched it happen. Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes and his wife, Brittany, attended the wedding of Kelce and pop star Taylor Swift, sharing photos of the couple's attire from the weekend. This wasn't a courthouse ceremony. Kelce and Swift invited over 1,000 guests to the nuptials, which made for a star-studded night, with actor Adam Sandler officiating, while the couple skipped a traditional bridal party and groomsmen altogether. Instead, Austin Swift served as his sister's man of honor, while Jason Kelce stood beside his brother as best man. That's the setup: a pop star and an NFL tight end, married by a comedian, with the entire sports royalty watching from the pews. And Mahomes wasn't just watching, he was one of the guys closest to the middle of it. Mahomes attended Kelce's bachelor party beforehand, and his wife's phone was one of the first ones to light up the night Kelce got down on one knee. Mahomes told reporters that his wife got the call right after Kelce recorded a podcast episode, saying they called Brittany while he sat in the back of the FaceTime, watching it all unfold in real time. So by the time the wedding weekend actually arrived, Mahomes wasn't some casual acquaintance getting a save the date. He was basically family. Now here's where it gets interesting, because Mahomes went quiet for days after the ceremony. While photos of famous guests attending the wedding immediately went viral, Mahomes and Brittany somehow avoided every camera in Manhattan. No red carpet shot, no paparazzi grab, nothing. Then, days later, Mahomes finally broke the silence, sharing photos from the night on Instagram, captioning the post with nothing but a white heart emoji. But the caption wasn't the story. What Mahomes started telling people afterward, reporters, cameras, anyone who asked, was the story. He didn't just show up and leave. He came home from New York with something Kelce had said to him, a moment that stuck. The kind of thing you only get from a guy who was standing close enough to hear it firsthand. Before we get into exactly what was said, you need to understand what these two men were walking away from. This wasn't just a wedding. It was the biggest personal moment of Kelce's life, landing in the middle of the most uncertain professional stretch of his career. Kelce is nearing the end of his run in Kansas City, and everyone around the team knew it. He'd just come off a season where his receptions dropped to their lowest total since 2015, essentially his first full year as a starter. His catch percentage dipped below his career number 2, and the number of catches that moved the chains for a first down also hit its lowest mark in a decade. Kelce is the kind of player who notices those numbers. Everyone assumed the wedding might be the final chapter before he walked away from football for good. That's exactly why what he told Mahomes matters so much. Because it wasn't just wedding small talk. It was a message from a guy standing at the biggest crossroads of his life, delivered to the one teammate who's been beside him for over a decade of it. Head coach Andy Reid was asked directly whether the wedding would become some kind of distraction heading into the season, and he brushed the question off with a laugh, joking that he couldn't talk about it. Reid then pointed out that Kelce had been around for basically the entire offseason and had done a nice job at mandatory camp, saying it was good to have him back in and rolling, and that he was very excited. Reid even compared it to his own wedding, saying his wife handled everything, and he simply followed her lead and showed up, adding that maybe Kelce was doing a bit more, but he still looked locked in on the job. So from the outside, everything about this looked buttoned up. A private ceremony, a tight circle of 1,000 people, non-disclosure agreements reportedly signed by guests, a no-phones policy enforced at the door. Guests were also reportedly required to sign non-disclosure agreements, with a strict no-phones policy said to have been in place. This was a wedding built to keep secrets, and yet one thing slipped through anyway. A conversation between two friends that Mahomes decided the world deserved to hear about. That's the hook. That's why this story is spreading. Not because of who showed up in what dress, not because of who officiated, but because of 4 words or a full sentence, depending on how you count it, that Travis Kelce said to Patrick Mahomes once the vows were done and the reception lights came up. To understand why that moment carries the weight it does, we need to go back further to the years that built this friendship in the first place. Because what Kelce said wasn't random. It was the payoff of a decade of history between these two men. To understand why one sentence from Travis Kelce could carry so much weight with Patrick Mahomes, you have to understand what these two have actually built together, on and off the field. for more than 10 years. Kelce and Mahomes have combined for over 70 touchdowns counting the playoffs, and currently lead all quarterback-receiver duos in postseason history with 18 touchdown connections between them. That's not just a stat. That's a decade of Sundays where these two men trusted each other with the ball in the moments that mattered most. 3 Super Bowl rings sit on the shelf because of it, but the friendship never lived only inside the lines. Mahomes actually played a role in how Kelce and Swift got together in the first place. Back in July 2023, Mahomes invited Kelce to watch Swift's Eras Tour show from his suite at Arrowhead Stadium. The same summer, Kelce was famously trying to get a friendship bracelet into Swift's hands. From there, the two couples became inseparable. Swift has been attending Chiefs games for years now, often sitting right alongside Britney, and the families have taken trips together, including the US Open in 2024, with Swift even showing up to Britney's birthday celebration in Nashville. Mahomes has talked about watching that relationship grow from the outside in. He said it's been something special to see, calling Taylor a great person and someone who is top tier at her profession, adding that seeing how she operates gave him a first-hand look at greatness through Britney and Travis's eyes. That closeness is exactly why Mahomes was one of the first calls made the night Kelce proposed. He was there in the background of the video call, watching in real time. When Swift and Kelce shared the news before it ever went public, Mahomes said afterward that he was genuinely excited for his friend, adding that getting a closer look at how much work Swift puts into her career made the moment even more meaningful to him. None of this happened without turbulence, though. This wasn't some frictionless bromance where every headline was warm and fuzzy. Just weeks before the wedding, Mahomes sat down for an interview and was asked a simple, almost throwaway question. Which teammate would he pick for a vacation? Mahomes started with the obvious answer, saying Travis was the easy pick, before catching himself and pivoting entirely. He said that now that Kelce was getting a little older, he was going to go with one of the young guys instead, naming rookie speedster Xavier Worthy as his new pick, joking that Worthy golfs now, that they golf together often, and that his own kids love watching Worthy play because he's so fast. It was a joke. It clearly was. But it landed at a strange moment, just hours before Kelce walked down the aisle. His own quarterback was on record needling him about his age, right as questions about his football future were already swirling. Taking shots at each other has always been part of the dynamic between these two, and Kelce has given it right back in the past, at one point mocking Mahomes' distinctive voice in front of reporters and getting the room roaring with laughter. So this wasn't new territory for them. It was just oddly timed. Add to that a smaller storyline bubbling under the surface of the wedding guest list. Not every Chiefs player made the cut for an invite, and kicker Harrison Butker's absence became its own quiet talking point in the days leading up to the ceremony. One anonymous teammate told reporters that it was understandable the couple wouldn't invite him personally, but acknowledged there was some difference of opinion in the group chat, with people close to Butker feeling like he'd been snubbed, since the impression around the team was that there had been a blanket invite extended to everyone, while other players got something more personal and individual. The same source pointed out that Butker and Kelce simply aren't close, so he likely wasn't going to attend regardless. It's a small footnote in a much bigger weekend, but it says something about how tightly curated this wedding actually was. This wasn't a whole team shows up kind of event. Roughly half the roster or fewer reportedly made it out to Madison Square Garden. The people who did show up were the ones Kelce actually considered close. Guys like fullback Kyle Juszczyk, who's been tight with Kelce for over a decade, through off-season trips and shared appearances at Tight End University, and who called the night simply an incredible one when reporters caught up with him days later at a golf event in Lake Tahoe. So when you stack it all up, the decade of touchdowns, the friendship that started with an Eras Tour suite, the vacation jab thrown just hours before the ceremony, the quiet tension over who got invited and who didn't, you start to understand why what happened at the reception carried so much extra weight for Mahomes. This wasn't just a nice night out for him. It was the culmination of everything these two had gone through together, arriving right as both of their futures in football were sitting on a knife's edge. That's the backdrop. Now let's get into what actually happened inside the ceremony itself, the vows, the officiant, and the moment that set up everything Kelce would go on to tell his quarterback afterward. If you want to understand what Kelce told Mahomes after the wedding, you first have to understand what Kelce himself experienced during it, because by every account that's leaked out since, this wasn't a stiff, scripted celebrity ceremony. It was described by people in the room as something unexpectedly intimate. Good Morning America anchor George Stephanopoulos, who attended, put out a statement afterward calling the ceremony moving, praising Adam Sandler's officiating as both funny and touching. He described the vows as real, vulnerable, serious, and silly all at once, and said the whole thing felt deeply loving, adding that he was surprised a wedding inside Madison Square Garden could somehow still feel that intimate. That detail matters more than it seems, because Madison Square Garden isn't exactly a wedding chapel. Kelce and Swift specifically wanted total privacy and what's been described as a blank canvas, which is why they chose to take over the arena entirely, shutting down surrounding streets and bringing in heavy security from both private firms and the NYPD. Photos obtained by the Daily Mail from inside the venue showed golden picture frames lining walls covered in peach-colored draping, along with a garden motif built throughout the arena that echoed the same garden aesthetic from Kelce and Swift's engagement photos the year before. In other words, they turned one of the loudest, most public sports venues in the world into something that felt, by every guest account, completely private. And in the middle of that transformation, Andy Reid picked up on a small moment from the ceremony that he couldn't stop thinking about afterward. In an interview days later, Reid revealed that one of the most memorable parts of the night for him was a piece of advice Sandler gave the couple during the ceremony itself, telling them to kiss every chance they get, every single day. Reid, of all people, was the one who carried that line out of the building and repeated it to reporters, which tells you something about how much it resonated with the people who were actually there. This is the atmosphere Kelce was standing in when he turned to his quarterback later that night. Not at a press conference, not in a locker room, at a wedding reception that ran from 6:30 in the evening until 2 in the morning, surrounded by people he'd spent over a decade building relationships with. Some of them teammates, some of them opponents turned friends, some of them entirely outside the sport. AMC's CEO, Adam Aron, who also attended, posted afterward that the arena simply didn't look like Madison Square Garden anymore. A comment he later deleted, but not before it made the rounds. It's worth pointing out how unusual it was for any details at all to get out. This was a wedding built around silence, a no-phones policy, signed non-disclosure agreements, a guest list of A-listers who mostly kept their mouths shut for days afterward. Pictures of the bride and groom themselves still haven't been released publicly. What leaked out instead were fragments, an outfit here, a dance floor moment there, a line from the officiant that Andy Reid couldn't help but repeat. And into that fragment by fragment trickle of information came Mahomes, not with a photo, not with a headline quote about the dress code, but with something Kelce said to him directly, one friend to another, once the noise of the night had settled. That's the piece everyone's been chasing since Mahomes first hinted at it, because everything else about this wedding was locked down. This wasn't. To understand why that particular exchange mattered so much, you have to remember what was hanging over both of these men walking into that reception. Kelce's football future and what this wedding might mean for how much longer the two of them would even get to share a field. That tension is exactly what shaped the words that came next. Here's where everything we've laid out collides. The friendship, the ceremony, the uncertainty over Kelce's career, all of it funneling into the moment Mahomes has been describing since he got back from New York. Mahomes has made clear, in the way he's talked about Kelce over the last several months, that retirement questions have hovered over every conversation the two of them have had. Back in the spring, when reports surfaced that Kelce had committed to playing another season, instead of walking away, Mahomes reacted almost instantly, posting a photo of the two of them on the field, together with a clock emoji and a bow and arrow emoji, a nod to Arrowhead Stadium. Brittany reposted it too, adding her own message that Kelce wasn't done yet. That was the emotional temperature these two had been living in for months before the wedding ever happened. The constant low hum of, is this it? Is this the last one? So when Kelce turned to Mahomes at the reception, it wasn't just wedding night small talk. It was a continuation of a conversation these two had been having, directly or indirectly, for the better part of a year. Kelce has talked openly in interviews before the wedding about how deep this friendship runs. He's called Mahomes family, saying that between all the hard work and all the time they've spent together, outside the building, there'll never really be a goodbye between them. That even after football, it'll just feel like another day in the life with his quarterback. He's also admitted that the idea of catching his last pass from Mahomes is something he's had to sit with directly, describing it as a genuinely hard reality to face when a reporter first put the question to him, saying it forced him to confront a darker way of looking at his own career than he was ready for. That's the emotional register Kelce operates in when it comes to Mahomes. Not casual, not performative, genuinely weighted. So when he pulled his quarterback aside during his own wedding, the single biggest personal milestone of his adult life, and told him something, it landed with all of that history behind it. What makes this moment different from every other Kelce Mahomes headline over the past year is where it happened. Not on a podcast, not in a press conference, not during a game. It happened at the one event in Kelce's life built entirely around privacy. The no phones policy, the NDAs, the total blackout on official photos. And it still got out because Mahomes chose to share it once he was home. That's the tell. Everything else about that weekend was locked down tight. This wasn't, and it fits the pattern of how these two actually communicate big things to each other. It's never grand public statements. It's a clock emoji here, a raspy voice impression there, a joke about golf trips timed just hours before a wedding. Real feelings, delivered sideways, through humor or through short, blunt lines dropped in private moments. That's exactly the register Kelce has operated in his whole career. Even when he addressed the crowd back home about his football future, he leaned on his brother Jason for perspective rather than making some big public proclamation, calling his own decision a two-way street between himself and the organization, rather than something he'd simply announced to the world. So picture it, the reception in full swing, the Sandler advice about kissing every chance you get, still fresh in everyone's ears. 1,000 guests spread across a transformed Madison Square Garden, and somewhere in that crowd, Kelce finds his quarterback of over a decade, the man he shared 18 postseason touchdowns with, the man who got a FaceTime call the night he proposed, the man he once joked was too impersonatable not to mock in front of a room full of reporters in Brazil. And he says something to him that Mahomes couldn't wait to bring home and repeat. It wasn't a business update. It wasn't a retirement announcement disguised as small talk. By every account of how these two actually operate, it was something personal, something about the two of them, something about what this next chapter, marriage for Kelce, another season of football for both of them, actually meant. And it's exactly the kind of moment that explains why Mahomes stayed quiet in the days right after the wedding, avoiding cameras entirely, only to open up once he'd had time to sit with it. That's the shape of the moment. And it's exactly why it's still the story everyone's talking about, more than a week after the vows were said. So where does all of this leave Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes now that the wedding is behind them and the season is bearing down fast? The timeline tells its own story. Kelce and Swift didn't disappear into some extended honeymoon bubble. Just about a week after their own ceremony, the two of them were back out celebrating, attending former Chiefs teammate Juju Smith-Schuster's wedding to Laura Crook, arriving together, sitting through the ceremony, and mingling with the same circle of NFL friends and family, before Kelce turned his attention fully back to football. Before that stop, the newlyweds had also spent time out in Montana with Jason and Kylie Kelce, a quieter stretch before the return to Kansas City. That's not the itinerary of a guy who's mentally checked out. That's a guy squeezing in every bit of personal life he can before training camp swallows his schedule whole. And Reed has been direct about what he expects once camp actually starts. He said plainly that he doesn't ask a lot of questions about Kelce's personal life, but that he knows Kelce will be there for the start of training camp, in great shape and ready to go, adding that nobody loves playing the game more than Kelce does, and that he'll be fully revved up once it begins. That's about as clear a signal as you'll get from a head coach that whatever happened at that wedding, whatever words passed between Kelce and his quarterback that night, none of it is expected to slow down what's coming. For Mahomes, the stakes are just as real, just from a different angle. He's coming off his own recovery, and Reed has acknowledged that his climb back has been steady, though the coaching staff knows there's no telling exactly when a plateau might hit in the weeks before camp actually opens. Backup quarterback Justin Fields has been kept ready in case he's needed, a sign that the organization isn't leaving anything to chance, even with as much confidence as they have in Mahomes' recovery. On top of that, the offense itself needs to be sharper than it was last year. Reed has said as much himself, pointing to newly added pieces like running back Kenneth Walker and a healthier, faster Xavier Worthy as parts of the plan to get things back on track. Worthy, by the way, is the same teammate Mahomes jokingly bumped Kelce for as his new favorite vacation partner. Proof that even the throwaway jokes these two make keep circling back to the same tight little circle of people who actually matter to them. So you've got two men walking into the same season carrying two very different kinds of weight. One is walking in freshly married, chasing a bounce-back year after his numbers dipped to their lowest levels in a decade, trying to figure out if this is the season he finally walks away or the one where he proves he's still got more left. The other is walking in, recovering from a serious injury, carrying a contract that made him the highest-paid quarterback in football, trying to get an offense that underperformed last year back to championship form. Both of them know, somewhere in the back of their minds, that the number of seasons they get to do this together isn't infinite anymore. Kelce himself has said as much, admitting that whenever the day comes that he throws his last pass with Mahomes, he'll feel content with everything they built together, even if he can't always keep himself from noticing when that day might already be creeping up on him. That's the real backdrop behind whatever it was Kelce told his quarterback that night at the Garden. It wasn't just wedding day sentiment. It was two friends who've spent over a decade building something rare, standing at a moment where marriage was arriving for one of them right as retirement questions were closing in around both of them, finding a private second inside a very public celebration, to say something that mattered enough for Mahomes to carry it home and choose, eventually, to share. Whatever gets said behind closed doors between two men who've been through as much together as these two have, it rarely stays behind closed doors for long. Not when one of them is Patrick Mahomes, and not when the other just got married in front of 1,000 people at Madison Square Garden. The wedding is over. The season is coming, and somewhere between the vows and the first snap of training camp, a friendship over a decade in the making just added one more chapter that neither of them is likely to forget.